Hello and welcome to Spardha Lines, your one-stop destination for the civil services preparation, UPSC, KPSC and other relevant examinations. We have two important announcements before we start with our today's session. The first announcement is in reference to the magazine. What we are giving you is one of the magazines which will cover most of the content that is required for the KAS, CTI, Group C, PDO, FDA as well as other state exams. This will cover dates from November 2022 up until November 2023, and this edition will be in the market from Wednesday. It will consist of 40 pages and will cover all the topics that you require to crack these examinations. And followed by this, how do you understand what the exam is, what are the kind of questions that can be anticipated, that you will see it through the test series that we are giving you. So the test series is being conducted under the guidance of the KAS as well as the IAS toppers, and we will have these sessions on 22nd, 18 as well as on 25th of October. The first test series will be the All Karnataka GS test series for CTA and Group C on 10 a.m. All Karnataka communication paper at 2 p.m. on 22nd, and weekly current affairs test series on 18th as well as 25th at 10 a.m. So what are you waiting for? We will provide you all that is required to crack this examination so that you become the officer that you have been aspiring for. What you have to do is buy the magazine, which will be launched in the magazine on Wednesday, and follow our test series, which will have all the questions that is required from the examination point of view. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says the Indian Himalayan region needs its own environmental impact assessment. What is this article speaking about? This article primarily goes on to say that we have faced issues in the Himalayan region. One is with respect to the recent Tista dam breach, where we had the glacial overflow, and as a result many people lost their lives. This is one issue. We have also had landslides in Uttarakhand. We have also witnessed floods in Himachal Pradesh as well. When you look at all these regions like Sikkim, Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh, one thing that you will see is that these are the states which are within the Himalayan belt. So when they are within the Himalayan belt, should we not have an independent environmental impact assessment for all these states and in the Himalayan region? Why? Because when it comes to Himalayan region, they have a different topography of its own. We cannot have a uniform environmental impact assessment for the entire country, but instead we need to have the environmental impact assessment explicitly, exclusively for all these states along the Himalayan region, primarily because they come under a different topography. So this article goes on to say that when we speak about the Himalayan region and the states in and around it, we need to have a different environmental impact assessment module and the structure apart from the existing ones. That is what this article is in brief gist. Let us understand what are the various narratives that the author tries to bring through this article. First, we have to understand the meaning of what is environmental impact assessment. As the very name denotes, there are three words here. One is environment, impact and assessment. What is environment? That is where we live in the society. So the environment includes all of us becoming part of this equilibrium, and we have the ecosystem that we have established. We have the biodiversity as well. We have the animals, the plants and everything else which is part of the system. Then whenever a particular project is being initiated, let's say for example we are coming up with an infrastructure project, or let's say for example an atomic energy plant, or let's say for example a railway project, or for example a hospital. All these are the independent projects that the government of India is developing. It is developing in such a way where there is a forest ecosystem, or there is a river in that particular locality, or there is a mountain in that particular place. So we are developing such and such project in a place where we are deconstructing a certain system and constructing a new system. So we are destroying a certain part of land or a piece of land and coming up with with a new infrastructure in that particular program such that it will have environmental ramifications, it will have a social and economic impact in that particular region. So environmental impact assessment basically goes on to say that we are coming up with a program which will have a significant impact on the environment. What is this impact should be understood even before a program is initiated, even before an infrastructure plan is launched. That is what is called as environmental impact assessment. So understand what could be the likely ramifications of this particular project even before you start that particular project. If you are coming with a mining related activity, if you are coming up with a nuclear program in that particular place, you are developing some of the dams and other hydrological issues in that particular place. What impact of it, understand it even before you come up with that particular project. So environmental impact assessment is an assessment or understanding of the project and the likely consequences that that particular project can have to the environment, to the people, to the ecology, to the biodiversity existing in that particular locality. And as we all know, Mother Nature knows to cleanse herself. She will give you a warning and we have to pay heed to that warning. If we do not pay heed to the warning, the human beings are not the only species on the planet Earth. There are other biodiversity and other species as well. In order to manage it, balance it, she knows how to neutralize the entire system. Since we have been caging the animals for long periods of time, COVID-19 also taught us a lesson where Mother Earth, she had caged all of us within the four walls of our houses. So she knows how to do it. Similarly, whenever a project is being undertaken, we have to know what could be the likely negative consequences of it. Only then take up this particular program. Whenever we have the data, let's say for example we are taking up a mining activities, a data will be required, an analysis will have to be conducted, and a root cause analysis whether it is going to have a balanced development, sustainable development will have to be taken into picture. So once we have a comprehensive picture and a reliable data of that particular project, we have to see, is it only the necessity or do we have an alternative to it? If it is necessity, there are no other alternatives to it. This has to be managed with utmost integrity as well as safeguards and the methods. If there is an alternative to the existing program, we have to go to the alternative. If there is no alternative, we need to have the mitigation plans in place as well. So the environmental impact assessment is the overall understanding of the likely ramifications, consequences and the impact of that particular project on the basis of the data that we have taken, looking at the alternatives, if any. If there are no alternatives, ensure that this particular program or this particular project or the infrastructure development will have a mitigation module in it, so that this could not have likely consequences for the greater ecology in that particular area. When we speak about the environmental impact assessment, what exactly happens? We have to look at how this law was created and how this law ultimately came into implementation. When we look at the environmental impact assessment, it began in the 1976 and the 1977 when the Planning Commission directed the Department of Science and Technology to assess the river valley projects from the environmental point of view. Initially, when this particular project was taken up, that is the environmental impact assessment, it was created by the Planning Commission of India, primarily looking at the features of the rivers. So the intent was not mining, the intent was not agricultural activities, the intent was not industrial activities, it was not about other infrastructure programs, it was primarily about the river valleys. Why? Because rivers are an integral part of all of us, rivers are an integral part of many other activities, and it provides one of the important resource, which is the water, and right to water is also an aspect under right to health, which is covered under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. So this particular aspect became very important, and the original intent was created by the Planning Commission, and this was the domain of the central government. So originally, when it was envisaged, all the rivers in and around it was to be recommended, what could be the likely consequences was to be understood, and ultimately it was a subject matter only with the central government. Only the central government could decide whether this particular project should be initiated or not. And in 1994, the Union Ministry of Forest came up with the Environmental Protection Act, promulgated the first EIA notification called as the environmental clearance, mandatory for setting up specified new projects and also for the expansion or modernization of specific activities. In advance to the Planning Commission, they came up with what is called as the environmental clearance under the Environmental Protection Act. What is this environmental clearance? Let's say, for example, I'm coming up with a project. This project is likely going to have negative impact on the environment. So if at all so and so project is coming up in an environment, take the permission from the Ministry of Environment. Only when you take the ministry's permission, when clearance is given from the ministry, is when you would be able to execute the project. So the first was the Planning Commission, second was the Environmental Protection Act of 1986. Under that, seek the environmental clearance, we will give you the clearance and only then you would be able to execute that particular program. And subsequently many other amendments were brought into this environment clearance module, and then in the year 2006 what we had was the decentralization of this environmental clearance in the form of environmental impact assessment, and only when this power was given to the state governments, the true federalism ultimately came into the picture. And this 2006 notification has been amended several times as well. In fact, in the 2020 we had a draft environmental impact assessment which sought for the public comments, which created quite a furor because it was more about pro-industry compromising the ecological concerns. At this particular point, what we also see is the way that the environmental impact assessment has taken a step-by-step approach. So when we speak about what is in this environmental impact assessment, it gives us a procedure. It also gives us the institutional setup. What do we understand by the procedure? First, what you have to do is understand what this particular program or the project is, what could be the likely consequences of this particular project, and whenever you are creating such a project, who should give the permission. So what we require is the institutional setup. So once you have to follow the scoping, you have to give an ad, you have to see who are the people who will be likely impacted, you should also seek the opinion of the people in that particular area. These are the procedures that are supposed to be followed. Immediately after the procedures, go to the relevant authority, seek their permission, ensure that you take the permission from these institutions, and ultimately see whether you are following the procedures and due licenses and permissions are taken. Under this environmental impact assessment further, what you also have is a schedule. Under this particular schedule, what you will have is certain degrees of industries. So under this industry, mining industry, then you also have what is called as the, let's say for example, they are coming up with a dam project, or let's say for example, you are constructing one of the buildings near the rivers. So there are schedules that are mentioned about different kinds of industries. If at all this industry is mentioned, you have to take the permission from the central government. You also have to take permission from the state governments as well. So there is a schedule that is prescribed. That schedule has so and so industries that are already present. For these industries, take the permission from the central government as well as state governments. For few things, you don't require the permission from the state governments. For few items in the schedule, the central government permission is compulsory, mandatory, and is required at all consequences. So such includes mining, extraction of natural resources, power generation and physical infrastructure. And EAI is not required for many projects as they do not fall within this particular ambit. But this article goes on to say that when we consider this environmental impact assessment, what we have been seeing is a uniform across the entire country. This uniform approach should be replaced separately for the Indian Himalayan region. So special needs of the Indian Himalayan region, the region's vulnerabilities and fragilities have not been considered separately under the draft 2020 notification, which has been floated for the public discussion, does not treat the IHF differently than the rest of the country. So what is the author saying? The author goes on to say that when it comes to India, when it comes to the Indian Himalayan region, what we need to have is a separate environmental impact assessment, primarily because the region is different, the topography is different, it happens to be a tectonic region. We have seen likely consequences in the form of glacier melting. We have also seen how landslides can impact that particular region. There is flash floods because of the Himalayan region, and these flash floods are significantly causing harm to Uttarakhand, Himachal Pradesh in and around. So when the topography is different, when the region is different, when the weather is different because of the Mount Everest and other mountains in and around it, we need to have a separate environmental impact assessment in addition to the existing ones. So the Indian regulatory system uses currently what is called as a graded approach, a differentiated risk management approach, depending on whether a project is coming up within a protected forest area, a reserve forest, a national park, or a critical tiger habitat. The stringency of environmental conditions proposed in terms of references at the scoping stage of the EIA process is proportionate to the value on the sensitivity of the habitat being impacted. One unfortunate miss from this graded approach for differentiated risk management has been the IHR. Despite its special needs as an area of importance to the entire country, the region is treated like any other part of the country. So this article goes on to say that we have to treat IHR in a different way, primarily because of its ecological importance. The IHR, the region as a whole, is totally different. Currently what we are making use is called as a graded approach. What is a grade? A grade is nothing but, let's say for example, A grade, or let's say for example B grade, or let's say for example C grade, or let's say B, B1, B2, so on and so forth. So this is the gravity of that particular place. If there is grade A, hypothetical, if there is grade A attached to that particular region, you would not be able to conduct any whatever activities in that particular locality, because if you disturb that particular ecosystem, the ramifications will be far in excess. So a grade will be attached to a reserved forest, or for a protected forest, or a national park, or a critical tiger habitat. The minute a grade is attached to it, whether a certain activity can be done or not will depend on that. Similarly, what the author says is this graded approach for the entire country is same. So they have identified that if it is a reserve forest or if it is a national park, this particular forest will not be touched. So in this graded approach, why not bring a new dimension, a new parameter in the form of Indian Himalayan region? And this is since a different type of topography, the impact could be different as well. Introduce a new dimension in it so that this is not treated as a uniform approach. So there is no regulator at the national level as suggested by the Supreme Court in India in 2011 in Lafferty Union Mining versus TN Godavaram Thirupan versus Union of India to carry out an independent, objective, transparent appraisal approval of the projects of the ECs and to monitor the implementation of the conditions laid down in the environmental clearance. This is another major problem, and just because we have to conduct an environmental impact assessment, we are doing it for the sake of it rather than looking at the larger picture as well as the outcome of an impact of that particular project. It has become more of a formal reality and a mere formality that needs to be done for the environmental clearance before a project can be started off. So it has become a formality rather than giving meaning to it, rather than looking at the spirit behind the law, and that has to change, says this author. So basically, whenever we are initiating the environmental impact assessment, whenever the screening, scoping, public consultation and appraisal is done, this will require a separate process for the Indian Himalayan region, and at the same time the policy makers would do well to explore other tools such as strategic environmental assessment which take into account cumulative impact of development in an area to address the needs of the IHR as a fundamental policy. Take a keen look into this entire structure, revamp this entire structure, introduce new terms, conditions, structures as well as the institutional support exclusively for the domain of the Himalayan region is what is this article all about. Now let's look into the next article. This article says Bengaluru's waste management plan. First, we have to understand what is this waste management plan all about. When we speak about waste management, what is it? A solid waste management plan or a facility is that particular area where you conduct an operation to the solid waste that exists in that particular region, where you change the chemical, the physical, the biological properties of the solid waste and ultimately make it easier for disposing of the solid waste. What can be the solid waste? It can be the dry waste, it can also be the wet waste as well. When it comes to the wet waste, it can be the let's say for example the vegetable waste that they collect, or the dry waste can also be plastic, so on and so forth. So when we consider the dry waste as well as the wet waste, this is collected in one of the places, and once it is collected in one of the places, what would happen? You collect this particular waste and ultimately filter it out. You change the chemical, physical and the biological process of it, and ultimately make sure that the solid waste that is collected is easy to dispose of. And that is what this article speaks about in terms of the solid waste management plan for the city of Bengaluru. So in the present situation, what is exactly happening? We have the proposal that is being made by the government of Karnataka, especially for the city of Bengaluru, where they are planning to relocate waste processing facilities operation in Bengaluru to the outskirts of the city. Why? That is because it is not able to handle the required solid waste management. So the capacity that is already being developed in the city of Bengaluru is far less, because the output can be, let's say, about 6,000 tons or the 5,000 tons, whatsoever it is, but the amount of filtration or the solid waste management plants it is able to do is only about 1000 TPD or the tons per day. This is where the major problem is. So if this is the city of Bengaluru, on the outskirts of the city along all areas, that is north, east, south, west, in all areas, they will identify outside the city what is called as the solid waste management plan. So this solid waste management plan will be identified. So the authorities have been given the permission to identify the solid waste management plan, and ultimately new structures will be built up so that the solid waste management structure in terms of physical, chemical and biological processes can be changed, and ultimately it becomes easy to ensure that they are disposed of. Currently, the city of Bengaluru generates approximately 5,000 tons per day of waste, which is expected to raise around 6,000 TPD over the next 4 to 5 years. The existing wastewater processing capacity in Bengaluru stands at about 2,000 TPD. What is the existing capacity? It is 2000. How much is the amount of solid waste that is generated? 5000. What is the difference? The difference is 3000. So they are not able to manage the 3000 tons per day of solid waste management, and as a result, either they are dumping the waste on the lands instead of processing them. So in order to overcome this particular issue, in order to overcome the dearth, in order to overcome the efficiency, because they are not able to manage it, we require the solid waste management plants outside the city. So it is due to this capacity shortfall that Bengaluru has made this decision to identify locations for 4 additional waste processing facilities outside the city. What is the existing program that we see in Bengaluru? Historically, composting facilities at waste processing sites from Bruhat Bengaluru have been put up at Mandur, Lingedanahalli, Kannahalli, Sigehalli, and this has been encountered with strong opposition, primarily because these operations are not enough. As we discussed, the capacity is about 2000 TPD, but the output that is being generated is about 5000 TPD. So the issue is there is not much efficiency, it is not able to meet up to this issue, and at the same time the existing plants that we have in Bengaluru are designed to only handle a minimal amount, but there is massive output that is being generated. This has also operated at less than 50% efficiency as well. In fact, in all these places wherever these solid waste management plants is, there is excess leachate as well as odor issues, that is the smell that is generated from this pungent smell, the leachate, the odor issues, the bad smell, the nauseating feeling that generates out of this has affected the environment as well as the livelihood of the people who are present in this particular locality, and as a result they are planning to move these plants outside the city limits, whereby these lands will be identified by the officers, and ultimately they will be able to select the government lands so that these issues of solid waste management can ultimately be exhibited. So there is combination of the centralized and the decentralized planning processing system that is required, and this expansion should ensure that no facility receives more waste than in the designated capacity. The new waste processing facilities should ideally have the capacity to process 1000 TPD each to ensure that all the 6000 TPD of waste generated in the city are compost, and the technology of choice should be composting of fresh waste, which is suitable to all the weather conditions of Bengaluru. And when we speak about Bengaluru, Bengaluru is known for its beauty. Morning you will have a sunshine, afternoon what you will have is a rainfall, evening what you will have is a winter and a cozy and a cold climate, and by night you will be able to have a peaceful weather. For different kinds of weather conditions that we primarily have in Bengaluru, what is the weather conditions? It's gonna change very frequently. So in order to address all these weather conditions, the nauseating feeling, the odor, the pungent smell, all these will have to be addressed when it comes to the solid waste management. About 60% of the waste is biodegradable, wet waste, some 25% is dry waste, and the remaining 50% consists of inert materials such as silt and stones. Each facility should be designed to incorporate a 600 TPD composting facility, a 250 TPD material recovering facility, 150 TPD scientific landfill to dispose of the inert action. So these mechanisms are the need of the hour. The main cause of odor in waste processing facilities is the high moisture content in the material when it is being composted. To manage this, the waste processing plant should be equipped with high capacity lane turners, window turning equipment instead of having to be turned manually using the excavators, and then turning the composting material around the frequent intervals can expedite the composting process and minimize odor because the material will be aerated as well as circulated. These are some of the measures that one has to take, and added to it, when it comes to the land acquisition, what we are doing is acquiring the land for this particular property. For the solid waste management to be established in a region, what we have to do is acquire the land. As this particular land is being acquired, there are two forms of acquisition. One, it can be a government land or it can be a private land. If it is the government land, it is easy. They would be able to take a part of the government land and put up for the solid waste management. But what if it is a private land? What is a private land? Land that is owned by you, me, all of us. So if this particular property is being taken by the government, it can lead to a lot of litigation as well. What could be the likely litigation? One, the government is paying very less for this particular acquisition. This is one part, and if the government is able to meet as per the market value, then this litigation is ultimately coming to end. And what if they do not want to sell this particular property? What if this property value is more, which the government is not able to bear the value of it? So this will lead to litigation, this will lead to the court cases, and ultimately land acquisition will not be successful. So this article says that when we are speaking about land acquisition, it is better that we go for the government lands rather than the private lands, because acquisition becomes very tough when it comes to the private lands. So opt for the state owned vacant plots and ensure that the local terrain and the rainwater management is not harmed. Whenever we are acquiring, even if it is the government land will be acquired. Whenever the land is acquired, it will obviously change the groundwater suction as well as the water management plan in that particular area. So whenever you are doing it, conduct a survey and only take that particular land. And added to it, conduct a geo investigation first. And when you consider the solid waste management, it will also release a compost, a solid waste, and this can be converted into a compost. So considering these plants will be located in the rural areas, this compost can also be used as a chemical fertilizer. So this can reduce farmers' reliance on the chemical fertilizers, saving them 15,000 to 20,000 per annum. And in fact, the annual waste of output of Bengaluru is around 2.16 crore tons, could yield approximately 32.4 lakh tons of organic compost, ultimately replacing a significant portion of chemical fertilizers used in Bengaluru rural and the Ramnagara district. So what is the way forward? Convert the wet management processing into dry waste management facilities in the existing ones, because in Bengaluru it is creating a lot of odor and nauseating feeling. These wet processing facilities which are existing should be converted into dry waste facilities. These converted plants can handle about 150 tons each day waste generated in the city, thus reducing the transportation cost. So it is not that we are creating all new operations in outside the Bangalore, but existing ones can be converted into dry waste management facilities. So for the dry waste management facilities that we have created in the existing ones, if we are able to do so, the transportation cost from these cities to outside the cities can be reduced. Dry waste segregation facilities are likely to pose less problems to the residents as they do not produce the odor. They can also create more job opportunities in that particular area. And the success of the proposed facilities and sustainable use of existing facilities depend on the technology, environmental impact, social impact, past experience, as well as the community involvement. So only when we have all these stakeholders come together, we will make it a successful mission, is what is this article all about. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about palliative care. What is this palliative care? Let's say for example, there is a person who is suffering from cancer, or let's say for example, a person who is suffering from one of the diseases, a non-communicable disease, where he is spending a lot of time and money and financial outcome because of such an issue. So what is palliative care? It is the care that is given to a person who is suffering from life-threatening diseases like cancer, so on and so forth. Since this person will be admitted to the hospital, he may have to stay in the hospital for a very long period of time. Taking care of this person to reduce the financial burden is what is called as palliative care. Let us understand what is the importance of this article. When we speak about palliative care or diseases in general, what could happen? Let's say for example, a person is suffering from cancer, or let's say there is an old person or a senior citizen who is above 60 years of age. As we get older, we will have significant diseases that will impact our body. So how do we overcome this particular issue? One, we have to maintain a healthy lifestyle while we are young, and even if we do not do so, after a particular period of time, we have to start exercising it. We have to have healthy eating habits. Do not drink or smoke, because our body is not acclimatized to such eating or such kinds of excessive smoking as well as alcohol. This is one part. Despite taking care of it, some of them will face, let's say for example, non-communicable diseases like kidney related ailments, cancer, so on and so forth. At that particular moment, if a person starts suffering from cancer or any other ailment, this person may be economically poor. Since he is economically poor, what exactly happens? This person will have to start spending for him to live, and as a result, he may not be financially sound, and he starts selling his assets as well. He has to go for the outpatient department. He will be going for the consultations as well, and at the same time, if this required periodic medication, this person will sell his house, his other personal assets only to live for the remaining term of his life. And as a result, this person who is suffering from some of the ailments like cancer or kidney related issues, heart related issues, so on and so forth, has to spend a lot of time in the hospital if this person is not treated properly, and if he does not have the money. In that particular case, the person faces physical trauma, and at the same time, what he faces is the emotional trauma. There have been examples where people who have been suffering from age related ailments, or for example like cancer, so on and so forth, sell their assets and they completely become poor. In order to overcome it, what this article says is early initiation of the palliative care in patients with advanced disease has shown to reduce health expenditure by up to 25%. So identify this health related issue much prior and start addressing it, so that we would be able to address the root cause of it. If it is identified at the very start, then we would be able to reduce the impact of the palliative care. So what is palliative care? If a person is suffering from threatening diseases like cancer or heart disease, or from kidney related disease, or any other issue which is life threatening, taking care of this person, one, physically, and at the same time emotionally, psychologically, is what is called as palliative care. So palliative care is provided through outpatient visits, inpatient visits, and home-based care. Home-based care further reduces the cost of seeking care, as homebound patients no longer have to travel to seek health care. So it says that whenever a person is suffering from serious health related issues, this person can go to hospital and then this person's issues are addressed. If this person need not go to hospital and everything is taken care at home, one, this will save on the expenses of the transport. This person need not have to go to the hospital. Let me give you an example as given under this article, that a person who's had a stroke was given a physical disability and pension of about 1600. So this person has to travel from his village to the district headquarters where there is the hospital. If he has to travel, he has to spend around 1200, but this person does not want to travel primarily because so that he can save on this 1200. So the amount of money that he is getting as the pension or as a person who is bedridden is only 1600. If he is spending 1200 for the traveling part, then most of his savings or the pension that he is given is gone for the transport. So if he can be provided home care, this money can also be saved as well. Vocal rehabilitation and social integration are social elements of palliative care which further help the affected family and the patient by providing them with opportunities to earn a living and live independently with dignity. Despite existing for nearly 4 decades, awareness regarding palliative care in India, both among the healthcare and general public, is low. This happens to be the major impediment and an obstacle. Also, currently palliative care is not covered under most insurance schemes in India. These two factors have resulted in poor demand and poor access to the palliative care in the country. Unplanned and abysmal funding has also become a major barrier to the public health centers, and as a result, government has to take the responsibility. The private sector, which is more so focused on the profit, are not engaging in any kind of these activities. They do not involve much when it comes to the palliative care. So it becomes the responsibility of the government to come up with more measures as well as scheme. As of now, when you look at such schemes and programs, they have been addressed only by the non-profit organizations or few NGOs. This should not be led to the NGOs, but this should ultimately be taken care by the government. So they have to introduce new policy initiatives as well as schemes so that palliative care can be taken into picture so that we can reduce the financial distress for the people, is what is this article all about. Now let's look into the next article. This article says Supreme Court declines abortion plea, says it can't stop heartbeat of viable fetus. Recently there was an issue before the Supreme Court of India, that is, a person who was pregnant, she wanted to terminate or she wanted to abort the fetus, but she was well past the abortion limit of 24 weeks under the Medical Termination of the Pregnancy Act. Under the Medical Termination of the Pregnancy Act, a person would be able to abort the fetus up until 24 weeks. But after 24 weeks, even if they have to do, then what they require is the assistance and the permissions from the doctors. The doctors in this specific case have said that there will be no issues for the women who is having the baby and the fetus, and there will be no significant damage or the problems to the fetus, that is the baby as well. Since the doctors have said that there will be no harm or life threatened to that particular woman as well as to the fetus and the baby, the Supreme Court has declined to give or abort that particular baby. So basically, Chief Justice Chandrachud said that life used in the provision cannot be equated to the broader meaning in which life is used in Article 21 of the Constitution. Article 21 upholds an individual's fundamental right to dignified and meaningful life. Section 5 of the Medical Termination of the Pregnancy Act prescribes medical termination if the pregnancy was immediately necessary to save the life of the pregnant woman. But in this case, it is not damaging the women, it is not having any significant impact to the women, and it is not having any problems to the women as well as to the fetus. Since it is not causing any kind of problem, aborting or terminating the fetus is not the right say, said the Supreme Court of India in this particular case. Now let's look into the next article. This article says India and UK discuss Indo-Pacific and trade. This article here is speaking about 2+2 dialogue. When we speak about 2+2 dialogue, remember there are two important parameters that we have to look into. One is with respect to the foreign minister, the other is with respect to the defense minister. So if we speak about 2+2 dialogue, which are the two ministries which are involved can be a probable question. So this will involve what is called as the two ministries which are foreign ministry, the other happens to be the Ministry of Defense. So United Kingdom as well as India discussed in the 2+2 summit, that is the foreign ministers as well as the defense ministers came together, and what they discussed is about Indo-Pacific region as well as the trade. The two sides discussed possibilities for further collaboration in trade and investment and critical and emerging technologies, civil aviation, health, energy as well as strengthening people. They also discussed about counter-terrorism, maritime security as well as disaster response when it comes to the sea area of operation. So these two ministers from India and ministers from UK met together, discussed about the Indo-Pacific region, counter-terrorism, disaster response and many other areas is what is this article all about. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. So if you're liking these initiatives, please do like, subscribe to our YouTube channel and also share it with your fellow aspirants as well. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.